Hello, everyone. How are you all? I hope you're all having a wonderful time. This is Aman, and with me we have Chris Bonnello, the author of Underdog series, and we have Aisha Jaz, our lovely team member of Kind Theory. So, how are you, Chris? How's everything?
Yeah, doing rather well, thanks. It's been quite a while since did one of these readings, and have really missed them. Actually, we reached the end of Underdogs 1. It was a great time last time I was here. But when we did that 4 chapters in a row showdown, and then
Yes.
we basically haven't seen each other since. So yeah, very much looking forward to getting into book 2.
Yes, it's been a while, and we had a grand ending to Underdogs 1, and I'm looking forward to what Tooth and Nail brings. It's really, exciting. And so, since it's been a while, I'm sure you have a lot of updates to share with us and the audience. Is there anything you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, well, funny you should say that. About 20 days ago, the final book in the Underdogs series got released. Here it is, Underdogs Uprising.
Ooh, wow.
This is where the whole war
Okay.
comes to an end.
Oh, I don't know if I want to know the ending yet, but like that's
Well, of course, I
the
don't want to know the
exciting
ending
moment.
yet.
No, but I don't. I was thinking if I want the series to end or not. So
Oh, I see. I'd say you got a fair while. This is book number 4 out of 4. So we've I can't remember exactly how long it took for us to get through Underdogs 1, but that is the shortest of the 4 books. In fact, just
oh
going by spine width, let me line up all 4 books in order. Okay, we are currently.
I love
Uh,
how the colors are, all
yeah.
very vibrant. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the cover design did an amazing job, and we're currently that far through the series. And I don't know if you can see in detail, but Underdogs 1 is a lot shorter than the others. Well, perhaps not a
Yeah.
lot shorter, but it's distinctly shorter if you're looking at the book actually in front of you. So it's going to be a while before we reach the ending of the series.
Yeah. So we have time. We have time. Right. Okay. Before we head on towards starting the second book of our series, how about we get a bit of a recap of what we did in the last
Yeah.
series, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Oh, by the way, as an extra part of Uprising being sent out, a lot of the pre-order rewards got sent out. So you may have noticed I'm wearing an Underdog shirt.
Ooh, so there's
I've actually got
merchandise now. I
my
love
own
it.
shirt. Yeah, it's sadly there aren't any plans on making it. So I actually talked to the guy who designed it, because the publishers themselves only did this as a limited print run, basically as thank you presents for the people who pre-ordered the final book. But I've been wanting an Underdog shirt for years, and now I'm wearing it. So
Yeah.
anyway,
It looks lovely. Looks lovely.
thank you. You asked about what happened in the first book. So
Yes.
um, the general premise, just to go right to the beginning, is that the whole of Britain has been imprisoned in these giant walled cities, and they're being guarded by 1 million or so clone soldiers. And there were only 13 people left. Well, at the beginning of the book, 12 people left who are fighting back against this army of 1 million, and they only really have like limited firearms, and they live in a house in the middle of nowhere called Spitfire's Rise. And 13 against 1 million, yeah, they're the ones who are trying to free the mainstream population. And I should probably mention that in fact, 8 out of those 12 people are teenagers who escaped an attack on their special school. So autistic
Okay.
heroes, dyslexic heroes, who's ADHD, main character's got PDA, and so on and so on. And yeah, that's the general premise of it. Obviously, you didn't need much reminding of that, given that if you're watching this, then presumably you remember that much about the first book.
That much. Yeah.
Just to set the scene, that's what the story is about. Now, early on in book 1, Ewan, Charlie, and a bunch of other underdogs are going out on an ammunition raid and find this mysterious person called Shannon, who's clearly had a rough time. They don't know who she is or where she's come from, but clearly she's important. And she also claims to know how to destroy the clones, which turns out that it's not literally destroying all the clones, it's destroying the clone factory that makes all the clones. So that's largely what book 1 is about. Go to New London, destroy the clone factory, hopefully find out about who Shannon is, and get out. Things get a little bit messy along the way. They end up getting themselves trapped inside the prison of New London. And I don't feel the need to go into all the details because, funny enough, the first half of the prologue, book 2, is a recap of the
Is a recap. Okay.
But it's written from Oliver Roth's perspective. Oliver Roth being the 14-year-old ginger assassin who, has a thing for killing underdogs. But, short version. They spent several. Go on.
No. You can continue.
All right. So. Basically, they spent far too much time in the middle of the prison in the centre of New London, and managed to find a way of breaking out. And once they broken out, they decided, you know what? Instead of just running home, let's actually complete the mission, destroy the clone factory, find out who Shannon is. Good news: they destroyed the clone factory, and they do find that information. Bad news is Oliver Roth kills Charlie, and I remember everyone's reaction. I was dreading reading it actually, because I knew what was coming. Everyone was excited for the ending, and Oliver Roth's going to shoot Charlie lots of times in the chest, and people are. And I remember reading the end of that chapter, and someone was just there saying, "Can you keep reading? I want to see if it's okay." He just got shot lots of times. He is not okay.
I remember that time.
They got back. The rest of them managed to escape, and it's revealed in the final chapter that Shannon is the daughter of Nicholas Grant, the guy who's basically Emperor of Great Britain. So he's the leader of all these citadels and all these clones, and. Yeah, she is basically fighting back against her father. Went out to try and find the underdogs specifically to join them and fight him. So now they're back up to 12 underdogs. They started with 12, then it's 13. Charlie's dead, so now there's 12. And I think that is largely it. But Shannon started talking a fair bit at the end about how much she admires the underdogs, and you're a good man, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. You and your friends are exactly who you're meant to be, which is, I think, one of the loveliest parts of book 1. But that is the catch up. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. But if not, I'm going to start reading.
I think we can start with the reading, and in case we get questions, I'll let you know.
Cool. Right, so open the book, and the dedications in the first one were to my parents who supported me through my best times and my worst times, and my then best friend and her children, who are now my partner and my 2 stepkids. And for book 2, to the memory of my adopted godparents, Ted and Mary Ward, who taught an autistic child to lead people. And to my adopted godson, Morgan, who I'm eternally proud of. So it's kind of like this informal family tree of, Ted and Mary taught me everything I knew about leadership. I grew up in the Boys Brigade, Ted was Boys Brigade captain, and then Circle of Life went on. And I've got lots of godchildren these days, but this one's dedicated to Morgan. Very, very
this is It's a lovely start dedication.
Okay, so the Underdogs of Spitfire's Rise, as of May 16th, year 1. The first book happened between, I think it was April 23rd, April 26th. So it's been nearly, but not quite a month. It's been about 3 weeks. And it's of all of the characters, and Charlie, unfortunately, has been crossed out. But it's basically a list of characters, so in alphabetical by last name. So Kate, you may remember Kate, 16, autistic, severe anxiety. Jack is there. Jack was another one who was in New London. Joseph McCormick. I don't think we've even mentioned McCormick yet. Absolutely legendary, the head of the Underdogs, who's 64. He's only ever been in combat once because, well, again, he's 64, but he's the leader of the Underdogs. And Shannon's here as well, Ewan, obviously. And I'll finish by telling you about the four villains as well who are listed. Nicholas Grant, undisputed ruler of Great Britain. Ian Marshall and Nathaniel Pearce, because the whole thing starts off with Marshall Pearce Solutions, this private defence contractor. Ian Marshall was the head of military. Nathaniel Pearce was the chief of scientific research. Basically, Pearce built the clones, and Marshall used them to take over Britain. And Nicholas Grant is basically the leader of everything. And the fourth and final one is Oliver Roth, age 14, army assassin. Speaking of Roth, here we go. Prologue. Oliver Roth never felt like work on a screen did him justice. He sat at his workstation, browsing the Clone Factory incident report, and wished it had been written with a little more flair, with him being recognised as more heroic. He had earned it. He grabbed his last slice of pizza and ate it in 2 mouthfuls. Life in New London's upper floors, with literally only 3 people in the country who outranked him, came with its fair share of luxuries. Among them was the opportunity for pizza on demand, even for breakfast. Yes, as a growing boy and a professional assassin, healthy eating was important, but only when his bosses were looking. Besides, they'd forced a 14-year-old out of his bed at 6:30 in the morning, so him eating pizza for breakfast was their fault, really. Just confirming that everyone can still definitely hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. Cool. Right. Executive Summary Report, the screen said. New London Clone Factory Destruction, as in the events of Book 1. Roth huffed. Nicholas Grant, dictator and master of Great Britain, had chosen such a stale and wooden title for such an exciting few days. Updates and this is clearly words on a screen that I'm reading now. I'll change my tone of voice when it's obviously words on a screen. Updates in progress, May 16th, Year 1. On April 23rd, Shannon Grant fled New London with her associate, Lieutenant Anthony Lambourne, deceased. They hid in a disused NHS health centre with a small group of takeover day escapees. There they were found and killed by Keith Tyler, deceased, within 24 hours, with the exception of Shannon. As commanded by Nicholas Grant, Shannon was transported by Tyler back towards New London. However, she was able to kill him and escape. Wow, Nick, could you have made this sound any more boring? This is your estranged daughter you're writing about. But Roth smiled. That was the great thing about being asked to proofread. He could make whatever edits he wanted. She was able to stab Tyler more than 50 times and leave him dead in somebody's back garden, the edited sentence said. Roth had never liked Tyler anyway. Smiling, he read on. Before their escape, Shannon and Lambourne produced a computer virus which would shut down and destroy New London's clone factory, which ultimately made its way into the hands of terrorist faction 001, known amongst themselves as the Underdogs. It is assumed that Shannon remains sheltered with them in their countryside hideout, which they have named Spitfire's Rise. Okay, he thought, let's make the next bits more interesting. The insurgents, struck out Underdogs, invaded New London on April 25th with a team comprised of Ewan West, Kate Arrowsmith, Jack Hopper, Alex Ginelli, and Charlie Coleman, deceased. Their intention was to neutralise, annihilate the clone factory, although they were forced to evacuate, chased by Oliver Roth, into the inner city prison. The exception being Alex Ginelli, who was separated from his group. See also the Ginelli Project. And no, you don't know anything about the Ginelli Project yet. But you will. Oliver came with the gruff voice of Ian Marshall through his radio. Nearly done, calm yourself. He knew his tone would annoy his boss, but Marshall was the kind of man who deserved to be annoyed whenever possible. Anyone who would willingly choose to be New London's head of military division was never going to be a barrel of laughs. We're waiting for you in the experiment chamber right now. You don't want to miss the fireworks, do you? You performed the AME experiments without me and I'll break your pretty little jaw. Now wait a second. Marshall huffed and fell silent. Roth continued his edits. The insurgents, Underdogs, were able to utilise a weakness in the inner city walls, staff incompetence, and escaped the prison on the morning of April 28th. They were able to destroy the clone factory as planned, in addition to seizing intel on the AME project, you don't know what that is yet, from an officer sector, and escaped with Alex Ginelli. The exception being Charlie Coleman, who was apprehended and killed, shot repeatedly in his chest, by Oliver Roth, bringing his underdog kill count to 8 of the morons. Roth smiled. It was an improvement at the very least. He read the final paragraph as he rose to his feet. To date, The surviving underdogs remain at Spitfire's Rise. They are assumed to be planning their next move against the AME project. As a result of their raid, research regarding AME has been sped up dramatically. Talking of AME, it was time for those fireworks. Roth jogged towards the door. Grant, Marshall and Pierce would wait for him even if he walked, but he couldn't wait to see the experiment for himself. Quick drink.
There are a lot of projects that we don't know about yet.
Yep, the AME project is the very important one. You'll learn a bit more about the rest as you go, obviously, but you won't have to wait long.
Okay.
With a swipe of his keycard and the flicker of a green LED, Oliver Roth was granted access to the experiment chamber. The teenage assassin found himself in the same room as Ian Marshall, New London's head of military, and Nathaniel Pierce, its chief of scientific research. Only Grant himself was missing. "Evening, Oliver," said Nathaniel Pierce with shallow sarcasm. It was barely 7 in the morning, but Pierce took every opportunity to point out his colleague's faults, including lateness. Roth smirked and said nothing. Part of being fearsome meant knowing when not to step into arguments. "Is the subject ready?" Roth asked, spotting the figure behind the glass. "He doesn't look it," replied Pierce, taking a sip of coffee from a mug which read "Smart Arse and Proud of It" in big bold letters. Not that it matters. Roth took a closer look at the clone inside the chamber. It may have been a manufactured collection of factory-grown flesh and organs, but the emotions on his face seemed very real. He showed signs of nervousness and suspicion, clueless as to why he was armed to the teeth with an assault rifle, holstered handguns, grenades, and a belt full of hunting knives, especially since the experiment chamber around him was almost empty, hosting little more than a pair of stone pillars that stretched to the ceiling, positioned a metre apart in the centre of the room. Roth glanced to his left. Ian Marshall was predictably impatient, his hands in his pockets and his top lip beginning to quiver. Nathaniel Pierce wore his usual creepy smile, perhaps a little too entertained by his own work. "Are we nearly there yet?" Roth asked. "AME is 4 months ahead of schedule," Pierce replied. "You can wait another minute." "Oh, don't say that like you're proud," Roth thought. "If it weren't for you and West stealing our plans from that officer's sector, Nick wouldn't have made you speed up the research. McCormick and his special needs kids have had 3 weeks to plan their next move." Special needs kids. It may have been true, but Roth used the phrase to insult his enemies rather than underestimate them. Thanks to their efforts in April, New London's glorious clone factory had become a burnt-out ash pit which hadn't grown a soldier in 3 weeks. Those special needs kids were the reason why the aging clone population was in steep decline, only propped up by imported soldiers from other citadels. I don't think you mentioned in the prologue the lifespan of a clone is about 4 months. So hopefully it's not going to be very long until New London runs out of its own soldiers.
Ooh, that sounds dark.
Yeah, but there are many other citadels, and they're importing their clones to New London, so they're okay for now.
Okay.
The phone rang on the side of the desk, and Marshall picked up the handset. Without seeking permission, Roth pushed the speakerphone button to allow himself and Pierce into the discussion too. "Experiment chamber," Marshall said. "Ian," came a lively voice through the speakerphone. It was the voice of Nicholas Grant. "Morning, sir. Looks to me like you're ready. Commence the experiment, gentlemen. You're not coming down? Floor F's too low for me. The view on my screen is perfect." Roth leaned over the desk. "Hey, Nick," he said. "I bet you wish Shannon were here for this." "My daughter made her decisions," Grant answered. "Now she can live with them." Roth looked to his left. Pierce's face wore an entertained grin, and one corner of his lips perked at Grant's last sentence. Roth could not interpret what that particular grin meant, and Pierce did not elaborate. "And you probably won't find out for another book or so."
I love how there's so much suspense here.
Roth had not spoken to Shannon much during their time together in the Citadel. As far as he remembered, the girl had spent most of her days locked away in some far corner of Floor A like a fairy tale princess. Whether this was through her own choice or through her father's overprotection, Roth had never known. He just knew that Shannon Grant had been a private, neurotic failure of a person, and she was probably still her private, neurotic, failing self in Spitfire's Rise too. "Now, if you please," Grant finished. Roth brought his attention back to the experiment chamber and the clone who stood inside, and he remembered how excited he was to witness the proceedings about to take place. Pierce nodded and pushed a button. The CCTV cameras around them began to record. 8 minutes past 7, announced Pierce. May 16th, Year 1. Final phase of practical experimentation underway. Atmospheric metallurgic excitation. Research Trial 26. Commencing. Marshall retrieved the radio from his belt and spoke to the clone behind the glass. Soldier, he began, move to the other end of the room, at jogging speed, passing between the pillars. Roth watched in amusement as the clone gave a frightened stare towards the shielded humans, perhaps trying to ask his superiors why. When none of them gave any reaction, the clone turned his head forward again. He knows his only option is obedience. Poor guy. The clone ran for about 10 meters, weighed down by his excessive array of weaponry, before passing between the two stone pillars. He didn't live long enough to notice what happened next. The slow-motion replay would later show the air rippling around him, as if he had run through a vertical surface of water. The previously blank space between the pillars turned crimson and wavy when touched. The clone's head, the first part of him through, was unaffected by the waves, but his fate was sealed as his metal equipment followed. The space between the stone pillars burst into action. Tiny lightning shards attacked the metal in the clone's grasp. His assault rifle and handguns, his grenades, the belt buckle and hunting knives, and the front of his steel-capped boots. But at that moment, Oliver Roth could only watch at regular viewing speed. To him, the dozens of explosions seemed instantaneous, as every metallic item around the clone's body was detonated by the red barrier. The shrapnel from the firearms and blades ripped through his limbs, sending his extremities across the room and his artificial blood splattering across the chamber floor. His right hand slapped the bullet-resistant glass in front of Ian Marshall, causing hysterical laughter from Roth. As the clone's torn remains fell to the ground, nothing more than visceral chunks of carved meat, the rippling red curtain faded back into invisibility as if nothing had happened. Bloody hell, thought Roth, grudgingly impressed. As much as he despised Nathaniel Pierce, the chief scientist had surpassed himself this time. Atmospheric metallurgic excitation, AME, had once been a crackpot idea from the depths of Nicholas Grant's imagination, but somehow Nathaniel Pierce had brought it into the realm of reality, an invisible wall of energized air that destroyed anything forged from metal. Sir, Pierce asked into the phone, are you happy? Nicholas Grant's discreet laughter answered the question for him. As Roth started to bounce on his toes with an excited smile, he looked to his side and found even Marshall smiling. Pierce rested his smart-ass and proud-of-it mug at the side of the control panel and started to applaud himself. Happy is one word for it, certainly, Grant said. Nat, can you confirm that AME can be reproduced on a much larger scale? Everything we understand about the laws of physics tells us it is now possible, Pierce replied. If it works for a square meter, it'll work for a square mile. And if it works for a square mile, and are we still on target to achieve this within 4 days? Grant's attachment to May 20th continues to make his decisions for him, Roth thought to himself. Yes, finished Pierce. It will be done within 4 days. Happy anniversary, sir. End of the prologue.
Okay, exciting. I look forward to what happens next. Whether or not they finish it up within the time they want, the time frame. So let's hope for the best. I mean, I'm sure you know what happens next.
I may have a bit of an idea what happens next, yeah. It is a mission that I certainly prefer to the first mission. In fact, I don't want to say anything about the book at all because I know that, well, among other people, Steph likes watching these streams, and she has an absolute zero spoiler tolerance.
Spoilers.
I will simply say that I prefer book 2 to book 1, and that's where I'm going to leave it.
Okay.
Okay,
Sorry.
Say again?
Sorry. Is there a specific reason why you think book 2 is much better than book 1?
It's like I said, I think it was before we started recording that they said this, but I think the action is, I think it's roughly as intense in both of them, except there's like more people involved in the intensity of Underdogs because a lot of it happens in the inner city prison, and the intensity in Tooth and Nail is usually with fewer people. But the thing that really makes it better, in my opinion, is the emotional attachment to the action.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that.
It's a lot more character-based action than the first one.
Yeah, character. But I think it's mainly because in the first book, the characters were, we were getting to know the characters initially, but now that we know them, it's much more easily understood how they're feeling and what they're doing. So, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Chapter 1.
Okay, so Chapter 1.
Let's go.
The underground tunnel from Spitfire's Rise was too small for Kate to stand up inside. Yay, it's Kate chapter. Whenever she tried, the soil would scrape off the ceiling into her hair. It wasn't the effect on her appearance that bothered her, but rather the sensory chaos of a mud massage against her head. There were another 20-ish meters before the trapdoor to the grassy hill. Raj was nearly there, barely patient enough to wait for his girlfriend. "Come on," he whispered into the darkness. Oh yeah, a bit of a recap. We've already said who Kate is. She was one of the main characters of book one. Raj is, I think he's 15, dyslexic, and revealed about 2/3 of the way through to be Kate's boyfriend. And he's very much a amateur detective, and has a fairly happy outlook on life as well. And it's kind of what Kate needs, the fact that she also would love to have this nice happy outlook on life, but she's also enormously anxious, and that dominates a lot of who she is. But one major thing that Kate's got going for her is she's brave. Whenever she's nervous about something, she pretty much automatically says, "I'm gonna do this." But,
I think I relate to Kate the most out of all the characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in almost every poll I've ever done, Kate is usually the one who comes out as everyone's favourite underdog, or the majority decision as favourite underdog. Although the most recent time I did it, it was actually Ewan who won, which surprised me. But I think he outdid Kate by 1 vote.
Oh, nice.
Anyway, so Kate and Raj have left Spitfire's Rise through going through the underground tunnel and out through the trapdoor.
Okay.
Kate took a deep breath. Normally, she only broke the rules on Sundays, but today she and Raj had a special reason for sneaking outside. Raj reached the trapdoor, pushed it open, and natural light flooded into the tunnel. He barely gave himself a moment to acclimatise before hauling himself up onto the grass. Kate dipped her head a little further and walked along the last wooden planks before the exit. Last year, McCormick's idea of an underground tunnel had sounded great, an opportunity to enter and leave Spitfire's Rise without using a visible entrance that might give away its location. But it had taken a long time to dig for 100 meters, and the claustrophobia of those months had stayed with her. "Before we do this," Kate said as she approached the grass-covered trapdoor, "are you sure today is the 16th? "Yep. And even if it's not, let's celebrate him anyway." May 16th, her brother's birthday. James Arrowsmith, autistic like Kate but in a completely different region of the spectrum, had turned 19 just 4 days before Takeover Day. Oh yeah, James gets referred to a couple of times in book one as being Kate's main motivation for fighting the war. And yeah, evidently today is his birthday. And it's also confirmed that turned 19 just 4 days before Takeover Day. You possibly worked out from that well, 4 days away from the first anniversary of
20th
Takeover.
May, yeah.
Exactly, yes. Which is to be what when the shield is supposed to go up. So I turned 19 just 4 days before Takeover Day. His profound disabilities were so complex and his reliance on routine so strong that nothing at all was allowed to change for his birthday. Wrapped presents and birthday songs would have been intimidating to him, but he had spent the day happy with how people had treated him. He had eaten his dinner with a birthday candle, but he had done that every day for the previous 8 years. On his 11th birthday, Mum and Dad had placed a battery-powered candle on his plate, not wanting to scare him with actual fire, of course, hoping he would tolerate it without becoming anxious. Even as a 7-year-old, Kate had wondered whether the candle had truly been for James's sake or their parents. But James had loved the flashing light, so much he had demanded the candle the next day, the day after too. Before the family knew it, every single dinner time, all year round, needed to feature a battery-powered flashing birthday candle on James's dinner plate. On his 19th birthday, on his 19th birthday, the candle was used accurately once again, just like how a broken clock was correct twice a day. And Kate remembered spending the day looking at James with beaming smiles. Even during her time at Oakenfold Special School, after her escape from mainstream, smiles had been hard to come by. So that day with her brother must have been wonderful. Wow, the world had changed. James was now 20 years old, celebrating with whatever routine he had established in the depths of New London's inner city prison. He had been in there for almost a year, assuming he was still... Maybe he really is alive, but maybe he's not. Maybe he found Mum and Dad, but maybe he didn't. Oh yeah, when James and the other Block 1 students from Oakenfold were captured, obviously the parents weren't there. Kate and James's parents were captured separately, so they literally have no idea whether the family's together. They don't even know if he's alive, or yeah, that's Anyway, as was always the case, the worst part was not knowing. Even after almost a year apart, Kate's codependency with her brother remained strong to the point of causing enormous anxiety. And with no facts to guide her, every possibility could float around her mind, especially the worst ones. Kate shook the thoughts out of her head and climbed through the trapdoor. She gripped the overgrown grass and used it to pull herself up. The wind was soft but cold. The sky had probably been clear all night, judging by the temperature. "Never stops being beautiful, does it?" said Raj. Kate looked up. Raj had already stopped searching for clone patrols. They were almost unheard of in the countryside now. 12 months after the end of the purge. 12 months ahead. They were almost unheard of in the countryside now, 12 months after the end of the purges. Instead, he sat himself at the top of the hill and admired the view, waiting for Kate to join him, and then closed his eyes to pray in silence. Kate sat on the grass next to him, thinking about how curious it was that she and Raj Singh had ended up together. Two Oakenfold special school students who had never spoken back in the old days, largely because Raj was in a class specifically for dyslexic students who could barely read and write their own names. There were some great thinkers in that class, but none who would be able to complete a formal written exam. Raj himself had been a genius at anything that required visual spatial thinking and could come up with bright ideas that would never have crossed Kate's mind. But his inability to record his brilliance on paper had left him in a class on the other side of the school to her. But here they were a year later, the autistic girl and the dyslexic boy, going out after however many years and not noticing each other's existence. She sat herself on the grass and found that Raj was right. The Hertfordshire countryside was a fine place to spend a war. Not all soldiers have picturesque villages and winding rivers outside their living quarters. The citadel of New London was somewhere on the horizon, a grey line only visible on a clear day. Many of Kate's fellow underdogs and classmates from Oakenfold had died in that grey line somewhere, and almost everyone she loved was somewhere inside the prison at its centre. She dropped her head, her gaze landing on the village before her. A year without humans had not done much to dent its beauty. The church looked old anyway, as did most of the houses. The village looked antiquated rather than abandoned. Fun fact, I actually know exactly where this village is in real life, and occasionally I just go there for a visit. I've identified the exact building which Spitfire's Rise is, but the people who live there have no idea.
They have no idea. Oh my God. I would like to know the location as well. Maybe one day I'll get to visit it.
Maybe or maybe not. It's revealed at some point in the novels.
Okay, exciting. Look forward to getting to know about it.
Depends under what circumstances you get to learn about it. I'm not
Oh
saying
no, please don't make this sound
I mean,
like
it could be that at the end of the series, everyone's survived, and then they go back to this place and they and identify to the reader for the first time what the village's name is, and it's all quite happy. Or it might be the case that someone just discovers the name of the village, it gets announced to them, and then something quite horrible happens, or anything in between. I'm not giving away anything.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're not gonna give us anything, so I'm not sure
Of
if
course
any of
not.
those options are possible.
Yeah, but I just personally know and kept it secret for a long time. But I even took my parents to that village and didn't tell them until later, until a certain number of books were published. Oh yeah, you're actually in the same village as Spitfire's Rise, having a meal at the pub.
Interesting. Did you think of the place before going there, or like,
Oh
did you
yeah,
go there and then?
I used Google Maps and trying to find a place that was about half a day's walk from the place also on Google Maps that I decided that New London was. And the funny thing is, there's someone reading the series right now who actually lives somewhere in that general area completely by coincidence, and she's trying to put together the clues and identify the village.
That's so exciting, it looks like a treasure hunt or something, you're trying to figure out
Pretty
the
much.
places, pinpoint them. That's very nice. Interesting.
Okay. The village looked antiquated rather than abandoned. She looked at Raj, whose eyes were open again. Whichever god he worshipped, he had finished praying to them. Oh yeah, Raj is very much kind of a deist. Like he believes in God, but it's not really specified, like even in his own mind, which god he actually worships. It's not written in the books, but in my head, he's raised around a lot of different people, a lot of different religions, and he can't just pick things up from all of them, but without really coming to his own conclusions about it.
Okay.
You know what really feels weird? She asked. We're 4 days away from a whole year in Spitfire's Rise, and I still don't know the name of our street. Be thankful, said Raj. McCormick played a smart move, getting Ewan to rip up road signs so nobody could give our location away. Then making him rip up some other villages too, Kate thought. Ripping some up from other villages too, Kate thought, so Grant couldn't just look for the place without road signs. Kate smiled, as if the memory had been a good one. In reality, it had been terrifying whenever Ewan invited her along. Destroying road signs whilst trying not to read them, since the less they remembered, the better. Trying to remain unobservant whilst looking for the clone patrols that were still scouring the countryside. Knocking down every village sign within half a day's walk to the east, and then a full day's walk to the west so that Spitfire's Rise couldn't be located exactly in the middle. Every village's name and identity lost for the safety of 32 people, most of whom had since... Yeah, there were 32 underdogs at the start, and there's 12 now. What would you call this village? She asked to distract herself. If you could name it for herself. Some things are just too beautiful for words, answered Raj. Stop avoiding the question, Kate said with a laugh. I think it should have some kind of posh name, something Borough or something Ington. What about you? There was a noticeable pause before Raj gave his answer. It wouldn't be right for me to try. Oh, come on. A much longer pause. Is that nervousness? He's looking at his feet. That means he's worrying, doesn't it? My taxi to Oakenfold took me through this village every day, Raj said. And I could read the sign well enough, so yeah. Kate's heart stopped. Or at the very least, she could no longer feel it. You know? Yeah. All along, you've always known. Yes, Kate, I know the name of this village, but nothing more than that. Nothing more was needed. Kate's arms and legs began to lighten, as if somebody had switched the gravity off beneath her. For all my years fighting anxiety, it still doesn't take much, even the smallest thing. No, this is not the smallest thing. My boyfriend just told me our lives are in real danger. He only needs to screw up once, and McCormick knows, Raj continued. I was honest with him about it. That's why he's not sent me anywhere for a while. Nowhere I could get captured anyway. Raj fell silent. Kate heard it too. A creak came from the grass-covered trapdoor, and by the time they turned their heads around, Mark was halfway out. Back inside, he grunted. Now. Yeah, you haven't seen much of Mark. He spent... Actually, no, I suppose you have. He spent the first half of Underdogs 1 being the bossy, intimidating guy in Spitfire's Rise, and the second half he basically forced everyone else, including Raj, to raid that health centre in Hartford. And he spent a year in a youth offenders institution, and it was revealed that it was because he stabbed his abusive father in the leg.
Oh.
Yeah, that's Mark's backstory. Yeah. Domestic abuse survivor who ended up going to the youth offenders institution for defending himself. Or at least that's what he says. Okay. It's questionable whether it was that or just good old-fashioned revenge. But that's Mark. Okay. Back inside, he grunted. Now. Oh, come on, said Raj, as if he'd just lost a life in a video game. We've only just come out. And now you're coming back in. Move. Mark Gunnarson, by far the fiercest student in Oakenfold, even more so after his year in a youth offenders institution, spoke with a surprisingly calm voice. With a reputation like his, he never needed to shout. His stony face and piercing eyes were enough of a substitute for raw volume. 3 minutes, mate, offered Raj. It's a brother's birthday. It's his birthday inside too, Mark answered, standing himself upright on the grass. Now, McCormick's woken up the whole bloody house and got us searching the place like you're properly missing. And I already lost an hour to Ewan getting ready for his precious raid. Get inside so I can go back to sleep. He held an open hand towards the trapdoor, his shoulders hunched and his face humorless. Kate rose to her feet, as did Raj at her side. As their heads came close on the way up, she whispered into his ear, "How did they know we were gone?" Don't know. Hold on. Damn, I just spotted a typo in my own book.
Oh,
right.
It's okay.
She whispered into his ear. She whispered into his ear, "How did they know we were gone?" Don't know. She replied. Damn. Right, I'm going to pause and make a note of that so I can talk to the publishers who are actually meeting face-to-face for the first time tomorrow and say, could you please make sure that next time you reprint Underdogs Tooth and Nail,
yes,
that you, yeah, it is amazing how many little things like that sneak through. I even had a computer reading through the book because this is my personal process with proofreading. I don't just read through it myself because I already know what I'm expecting. It's very rare that if a mistake is there, I'll actually see it. but the computer will just read out everything that's in front of it. And almost 100% of the time, if the computer says something unusual, I will notice. Clearly, this
Mhm.
one slipped past me for 3.5 years because this came out in June 2020. Anyway,
Well, it's never too late, you know.
yeah,
So,
true. Don't know, he replied. We did the same as every Sunday. It didn't take her long to work it out. It's not Sunday, she said. All the other days, Jack wakes up early to power the generator, so he must have. When she turned to the trapdoor, Mark was gazing at the sky with widened eyes. Something was wrong. The sound was distinctive enough. Maybe because there was nothing else in the countryside, or maybe because a year had passed since they had last heard an aeroplane. Somewhere to the east, a fleet of them were heading for the grey line in the distance. But Kate had never seen aeroplanes fly that fast. They usually weren't that shape either, but it was difficult to tell from so far away. Missiles, Mark whispered. Kate gasped. It would explain why there were so many of them, flying in no particular formation and at a very steep downward angle. Someone, somewhere, had launched an enormous missile attack on New London Citadel. Her stomach plunged, and a sense of absolute powerlessness overcame her as she realised the truth. That however fast she could run, however many bullets she could shoot, however much she could worry for the citizens of New London who would die as collateral damage, the events before her would unfold the same way regardless. There was nothing in this world she could do to change the outcome. Nicholas Grant, however, had the whole event covered, or at least the Cerberus system did. There were explosions, lots of explosions, but they were all tame. Grant's near impenetrable network of defense missiles rose from the corners of the citadel, giving it the appearance of a giant birthday cake, and intercepted the threat with a series of detonations. Once upon a time, the Cerberus system, which was mentioned in Book 1, but vaguely I think, had been Grant's way of persuading the British government to trust him with their country's safety. His promise of almost futuristic security, in exchange for limitless funding and influence, had been the catalyst for everything that had been allowed to happen since. That morning, Cerberus had been used to repel a foreign attack for the first time, but not in a way the government could ever have predicted. By the time the smoke started to clear, it was obvious that nothing remained in the sky. A couple of seconds passed in silence, and then the sound wave reached Spitfire's rise. The explosions had lost their volume over the many miles in between, and sounded little louder than tame fireworks. But those inside the inner city prison must have been in a state of utter panic. Although from Kate's experience on the inside, perhaps some were already harvesting the fallen metal debris to reinforce their fragile shelters. Well, muttered Mark, looks like Grant's safe. The internal conflict gave Kate a heavy heart. The world may have been a better place if Nicholas Grant and the rest of New London had died in a horrifying missile strike, but at least James would survive his 20th birthday. What the hell was that about? Raj asked at her side. Kate had no idea how to respond. Something big, she eventually said. End of chapter 1.
okay. So I love how it progressed from, a picturesque vibe with the village and all, and then suddenly we have all these
Mm-hmm.
bombs and like violence attached to it.
Yeah.
It's this whole progress that was beautifully written,
Oh, thank you.
but also
Something I kind of wish that if I were writing this this story again today, I'd probably mention a bit more about how there's exploding missiles in the distance, but around them,
Mhm.
this secret Hertfordshire village remains just as antiquated and peaceful as it was, as if it just does not care about what's happening in New London.
I was actually wondering about that. If that's how it is, for them. But
Yeah, they're
it's
quite
good
far
that you
away. They're
mentioned it. Yeah.
is it? I think it said half a day's walk away from New London.
Uh,
That's as in literally half a day because they
half
often
a
have
day.
to. They often have to stay overnight in villages closer to it, so they can attack early the next morning.
Okay.
Right.
So we have Aisha saying, Danya saying, love the story. And we
Thank
have
you.
Aisha saying that the wait was worth it for sure.
Oh,
And she
thank you.
looks forward to more now. All
Would
right.
you
You
like?
guys,
Would you like another
yeah,
chapter?
we could do another chapter. I would love it.
Yeah, because I'm thinking that it's worth reading chapter 2 simply because it sets up what the problem really is. I mean, you've got the prologue, which basically says it's about a metal metal-proof force field that it's implied is going up around New London. Chapter 1 involves a missile attack and you don't quite know what it is, chapter 2 basically clarifies what the rest of the book is going to be about. So
it sets
given the
the
comments
pace.
I've just seen, yeah, okay, and also it's been a while. I can give you another chapter.
Yeah, perfect. Let's go.
And besides, you haven't seen Ewan yet. Like, the main character hasn't appeared.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Let's start.
Chapter 2. Ewan had hated shopping centres for as long as he could remember. The crowds, the noise, the pressure on all 5 senses, and the constant onslaught of everything demanding his attention. His mother had tried her best when it got too much for him, but she couldn't handle the insides of his overloaded brain. Ewan's childhood memories of Luton Retail Centre, it doesn't exist in real life. I did double check that. There must be, in fact, yeah, there is a shopping centre in Luton because I've been there myself and it's awful. But it's not called Luton Retail Centre. But
Okay.
Ewan's childhood memories of Luton Retail Centre consisted of him not meeting the public's expectation, their frowns of disapproval, and their lack of sympathy whenever he had a meltdown. I guess those memories apply to my whole life, really, he thought. Luton Retail Centre felt much more pleasant nowadays. Ewan had the whole place to himself, except for one trustworthy friend by his side. I hope you know your way around, Shannon said to him. I spent my school years avoiding places like this, thanks to all the popular girls. You and me both, said Ewan. Well, replace popular girls with humans in general. Okay, it's round the next corner, I think. He was revealed to be right. The catalogue store had neither moved nor closed down since whenever his last visit had been, and hopefully it was still well stocked. Other takeover day escapees would have looted it before the clones hunted them all down, but nobody would have thought to steal the GPS devices for hikers. Whatever they stole, he thought, they wouldn't have held on to it for long. We'd probably only survived the purges because of the thermal blocker my dad stole from the barracks, keeping our body heat off grad scanning equipment. Oh yeah, that's something that's mentioned quite a lot in book 1 and just reminded in book 2. Ewan's dad was an army major who escaped the barracks on takeover day with a bunch of army equipment. Actually, wait, no. He escaped on takeover day with enough guns for him and his family to defend themselves, although all of them died except Ewan, who escaped and met up with the rest of the Oakenfold people. In the weeks that followed... Wait, am I about to just read this? No, I don't think he mentions it on this page. And just a few weeks afterwards, when McCormick said, right, let's not just be survivors, let's actually be soldiers. Ewan said, yeah, I know a place. Then they went back and raided the barracks for a bunch of things. And one of those things was a thermal blocker, which for a certain radius keeps body heat of basically anything bigger than a small badger off off thermal scans. So that's how they've managed to not be destroyed over the last year.
Not be caught. Oh, nice. Interesting. That's interesting.
Thank you. All right, so here we go. Oh yeah, this Ewan, main character, pathological demand avoidance, or PDA for short, and Shannon, the daughter of Nicholas Grant. And yeah, here we go. Ewan entered the store and headed straight for the warehouse at the back. Shannon paused and grabbed the nearest catalogue. No point in searching before you know its serial number, Ewan. Ewan saw her point, turned around and headed back to her. It was one of Shannon's interesting abilities, and he was seeing more of them week by week. She could point out Ewan's mistakes and misjudgments without him feeling uncomfortable. He wasn't sure how she managed it. Maybe it was some kind of unspoken empathy. With a father like Nicholas Grant, her own childhood may not have been much better than Ewan's. So, how's this for your first mission? Ewan asked as he flicked through the catalogue's faded pages. It's a boring one, I know, but boring is good, trust me. The first time you met me, Shannon said, I stabbed a man to death, she said without looking up from the page. After we slaughtered my ex and a load of innocent people. I know that boring is good, thanks. Besides, this mission doesn't really begin until we know where the test centre is. Ewan gave an understanding nod. Even though it was her first outing as an official underdog, leaving aside that first night and a deadly attack on Grant's number 2 assassin, as in Keith Tyler getting stabbed to death, Shannon had already proven her worth. Since their last victory, which could never have happened without her providing them the technology to destroy the clone factory, Shannon had spent 3 weeks analysing her father's plans, the scariest of which was AME, atmospheric metal something or other, an anti-metal shield over the whole of New London, and presumably one for each of his other citadels, which would render Grant and his allies utterly indestructible. The stolen plans had mentioned an AME test centre, a building outside New London where a smaller shield could be launched and examined before the real version went live. The centre was reportedly half complete, but they'd most likely sped up production after their plans had been stolen. But other than the words test centre and some GPS coordinates, the paperwork had contained no useful clues. The time had come for Ewan and Shannon's final piece of research, finding where those coordinates led to. Shannon found the technology section and ran through the item list with a finger which brushed away the dust as it went. Ewan glanced too and saw the prices on the items. 300 quid? Quid meaning pounds in British English. 300 quid, he asked. People paid that much for a GPS thing. They could have just downloaded an app. There are always people who want quality, Shannon answered. Photographers didn't stop buying professional equipment just because their phone could take a few snaps. Right, how about this one? Purpose-built for the great outdoors, accurate to within 1 metre, contains 1 to 50,000 Ordnance Survey maps. Can you use it to search for coordinates? Only one way to find out. Ewan, grab me some batteries. She ran for the warehouse, leaving Ewan to run and turn and head for the pound shop next door. She just commanded me, the Underdogs head soldier, to obey her. Why aren't I uncomfortable? Shouldn't my PDA kick in or something? As Ewan... Yep.
Yeah, it was just laughing at the thought process there. That was nice.
Yeah. As Ewan walked into the pound shop, he wondered how much Shannon knew about his pathological demand avoidance. She must have seen the diagnosis on the list of names she had brought Spitfire's rise, but a three-word diagnosis was no description of lived experience. The words pathological demand avoidance weren't enough to summarise a childhood of being frightened by other people telling him to do things, or the loss of self-control that came when people's demands made him uncomfortable. A year ago, a command as blatant as "Ewan, get me some batteries" would have switched on his defiant instincts as an act of self-defence. But somehow it was different when the command came from Shannon. Shannon had done a good job of climbing up his friendship rankings during her time at Spitfire's rise. McCormick would always hold the #1 spots thanks to his life-changing compassion and influence. And ever since Charlie Coleman had been gunned down by a red-haired assassin, the runner-up spot had been occupied by Kate. But Shannon was now in third, which wasn't bad for 3 weeks of friendship. Yeah, I wonder if you can see where this is kind of going. There was something else, though. Something which numbers and rankings couldn't account for. Shannon was fiery and determined. Uncompromising yet vulnerable. There was too much common ground for Ewan to ignore. For most of his life, he hadn't liked people who were similar to him, and he wondered what that told him about his opinion of himself. But at that moment, he was met with a young woman whose anger and passion pointed in the same direction as his own, whose fiery nature aligned with him rather than fought against him. Ewan grabbed the nearest pack of batteries and headed back for the warehouse. He'd been right about the looters. With so many boxes strewn across the aisles, it was difficult to find Shannon. By the time she did, she was ripping open the cardboard packet. She removed the GPS tracker and tossed it over to him, and he got to work with the batteries. Bloody hell, I missed the internet, he muttered. In the old days, this whole trip could have been avoided by using a search engine. He took a moment to feel grateful that the Underdogs still had phones even though the internet was gone. Nicholas Grant could have knocked out their communications just by destroying a few phone masts, and the simple reason he hadn't was because he needed the telephones too. His Citadel's secure intranet system, however, had enabled him to safely cut off internet access for the whole of Britain without impacting himself. Yeah, answered Shannon. Well, here are the numbers when you're ready for them. 1 second. Yeah, go. 51.812. Wait, slow down. Let me process what you're saying. Shannon sighed sympathetically. Sorry, Ewan, she said. I still keep forgetting. You just don't. I don't look like I have learning difficulties. Yeah, I heard it before. Well, you just seem really capable. Wow, autistic guy with PDA and anger issues are capable of doing stuff. Stop the bloody press. Now just go slowly. 51. Shannon read out the rest of the numbers with a saddened look on her face, which may have meant guilt. It made Ewan feel sad too. Normally it was nice and satisfying when he made someone realise just how little they understood his needs, but there was no satisfaction when it happened with Shannon. 7588, Ewan repeated as he typed in the final numbers. And yep, it won't surprise you to work out that the numbers in this book do correlate to exactly where this place is on Google Maps as we searched.
So we could try and figure it out through this.
I missed out most of the numbers, but okay. The numbers I picked were the right numbers. 7588, Ewan repeated as he typed in the final numbers. And our mystery location is... He pushed the search button and waited for the map to load. When it did, it revealed a large building on the outskirts of Harpenden. Where is it? Asked Shannon. Not far at all, about half a day's walk from Spitfire's Rise. In fact, pretty close to... Ewan looked closer, and his eyes widened. Ewan, what is it? The device shook in Ewan's hand. He was trembling from a mix of fear and rage, which must have been what Nicholas Grant had wanted when he had chosen the location. He threw the GPS tracker against the nearest wall, where it smashed to pieces. Unsatisfied, he took a short run up and booted an empty box down the warehouse aisle. It didn't go as far as he wanted, thudding to a quick stop like it was trying to insult him, so Ewan ran again with a scream and stamped it into the ground as if it were personal. Ewan? He took steady breaths and tried to ground himself. He rested both his feet flat on the ground, one hand against his hip and the other gripped against the nearest shelf. Your father's after a fight, he snarled, with me and my friends, personally. You want to know the real name of the AME test centre? It's not. It is Oakenfold Special School.
Ooh.
Yeah. So, yeah. Fun fact that's where the paragraph ends. There's a new scene immediately coming, but fun fact: the reason why those coordinates of the AME test centre correspond to real life is because it is Oakenfold Special School, and I pinpointed an exact place on the map, just around the edge of Harpenden, just next to a hill, and you'll realise why later on. But I've chosen that exact spot, and incredibly, around 5-6 years ago, some kind of miracle happened. A school in Harpenden invited me to give a talk, and I used Google Maps to find their school to work out how long the journey would be. Their school was about 300 meters away from Oakenfold Special
the
School.
place. Oh.
Yes, so I stood on the spot where, in my head, the sign "Welcome to Oakenfold Special School" is, and took a photo of the imaginary road where this school is, and then I drove to the school and gave training. So,
wow, that is so impressive.
Mm.
But also, like, the thought that has been put into this, like, you have managed to pinpoint places, locations, and like everything's all sorted here. It's very impressive.
It's almost like I have autistic attention to detail. So, yeah. Anyway, that's the happy stuff in the real world. In the Underdogs world, they just discovered that
dark.
the AME test centre has deliberately been chosen as their special school, basically as an insult to the Underdogs.
Oh, no.
Anyway, here we go. Half an hour had passed. Ewan had barely stopped running since they had escaped Luton, and it was difficult to run and talk at the same time. Alex, he barked into the phone. You know what Oakenfold means to us, right? The guys at home won't like the news. Ewan knew he was using the other students' fears to mask his own. The very thought of breaking such sensitive news terrified him, but he didn't need Alex to know he was terrified. Mate, they're already struggling with a missile attack on New London. Losing an already abandoned school isn't going to add much stress. Is that supposed to be some kind of comfort? It's supposed to be the truth. Alex Ginelli was hardly a sensitive guy, and he had no empathy for teenagers with special ed backgrounds. The 22-year-old from Brighton had been brought up in a different world, where places like Oakenfold Special School were safely hidden away from the rest of society. And even in the world he inhabited, he kept himself far away from most people emotionally. Alex put on a distinct lone wolf persona, and it showed so strongly it was part of his real person. It was probably a part of his real personality too. But it meant he had an outside perspective in most situations, and Ewan reluctantly admitted it was useful at times. Alex had certainly been in his element during their last mission, Underdogs 1, sheltering alone in a bungalow while until the others were ready to escape. Without his self-isolating approach to combat, perhaps he would never have been able to help Ewan, Kate, and Jack escape New London alive. Oh yeah, that's something I haven't reminded you about in the first book, that Alex was in New London for the first part of the mission, and then he joined Kate in the first attempt to destroy the clone factory, but he got pinned down by clones. Kate escaped. Alex was just
good not.
Yeah, but basically unknown for about 10 chapters, and then suddenly he appears phoning McCormick from this village with a bullet wound in his shoulder, and he basically spends his whole time in Underdogs 1 at that bungalow, waiting persistently for the teenagers to break out of the inner city prison, and then he engineers an escape route for them. So yeah, that's where Alex was in Underdogs 1, and he's recovered from his gunshot wound now. And so's Kate. Kate also had a gunshot wound in one of the final chapters of Underdogs 1. And Ewan had a very badly infected arm, which thankfully, even though the drugs that Lorraine being the nurse, had given to him, even though those drugs were expired, he's fine now.
No, that's good. That's a relief.
Yeah. So, look, mate, Alex continued, I'll head home and pass on the news to McCormick. If you're sure I can abandon comms. We're only an hour away, and our bit's over. Go and tell him. Got it. You've probably used up your 3 minutes of untraceable time, so I'm hanging up before Grant ends up tracking the call. Interrogate Shannon about the attack, though. She may know what's going on in Daddy's world. Without another word, Alex was gone. Ewan removed his phone battery and slowed himself down. You okay? Shannon asked from behind. Alex is passing on the news. So we can stop running now? If you like. Once he was at walking speed, Ewan looked at his surroundings for the first time. His vision had been fixed to the road like a blinkered racehorse, and he had relied on Shannon to watch out for patrols. The countryside was as pretty as always, and that annoyed him. His own world was in a mess, full of missile attacks and school invasions, and the rest of the world had the audacity to act as if nothing was wrong. Oh, kind of like I said to say about chapter 1. Turns out it didn't really say that because I said it in chapter 2.
Yeah. Yes.
So what do we know about the missiles? Shannon asked. Basically nothing, Ewan gasped. Could have been an attack by one country or a bunch of countries. The question is why they'd bother. Because my dad's a megalomaniacal dictator who destroyed Britain as we know it? I'm talking about the Cerberus system, Shannon. Your dad promised the British government that it would make Britain almost invincible to long-range attacks. That's how he got them to go along with whatever he wanted. Almost invincible, said Shannon. I guess that explains it. Ewan rested a hand against the nearest road sign. He was more tired than he wanted to admit. What? He asked. With Cerberus, he's almost invincible, Shannon explained. Missiles can't touch him, and any planes dropping bombs would just get shot down. The only way he could lose is by a land invasion. A land invasion with enough soldiers to scale citadel walls and fight back 1 million soldiers on their way to Floor A? Technically possible, I guess, answered Shannon with a shrug. But with AME, he'll be actually invincible. The world believes this is the last opportunity they'll ever have to bring him down, and a 1 in a million chance is better than a 0 in a million chance. Maybe somewhere right now, someone's trying a land invasion that's failing just as badly. Ewan wiped the sweat from his forehead. And they chose today because my father must be close. He'll have sped everything up after your break-in. And we've no idea how long we have, Ewan whispered. Weeks, days, hours? 4 days, interrupted Shannon. We'll have until midnight on the 20th. Ewan stared into Shannon's face and found her as worried as him. 1 year from takeover day, he muttered. I didn't think your father was a sentimental type. May 20th is his birthday. May 20th is his birthday. It's pride, not sentiment.
Yeah.
Ewan rolled his eyes and restarted his walk home. The rest of the journey passed in silence. The less they talked, the faster they could move, and the more time Ewan could spend with his thoughts. He had hoped they would be productive thoughts, but they weren't. There were chaotic ones that cycled through his brain, growing bigger and bigger as they went. The thoughts themselves never changed. His brain repeated the exact same phrases, but said them louder each time until they became his whole universe. Grant took Oakenfold. Grant took Oakenfold. Grant took Oakenfold. Over the course of his life, Ewan had tried numerous strategies to break the cycle and set his brain back on track, and the most effective one had always been finding a distraction. After a childhood being told distractions were bad, it seemed strange that they worked so well for him in times of anxiety. Like they did with me, this is directly stolen from my experience. Of course, adults commanding him to avoid them had only forced him to do the opposite. Ewan found a suitable distraction in the form of his mentor's face pictured in his mind's eye. Dr. Joseph McCormick, the anchoring figure of stability for Ewan and the rest of the underdogs, who had turned him little by little from an impulse-driven, violent child to someone vaguely capable of doing things well. Ewan pictured everything about McCormick, his glasses that magnified the calmness in his eyes, the hair that wore thinner on his scalp, and that warm smile that he seemed to wear no matter what mood Ewan was in. The mere image of that face in Ewan's mind helped him to steady his breathing, and before long he could start to refocus on his long march home. It was almost midday when he and Shannon got to the trapdoor, and a short walk through a narrow tunnel led them to the cellar entrance of Spitfire's Rise. Ewan let Shannon through the door first, partly out of respect, and partly so she would not see him glancing at the memorial wall on his way past. The name of Charlie Coleman still looked out of place. Ewan's old classmate and temper twin, with whom he had shared troubled times at Oakenfold and heroic adventures at Spitfire's Rise, now reduced to 2 words on a slab of dead people's names. Gazing at his best friend's name felt like staring at the sun, so Ewan distracted himself with the cellar's other contents, namely the weapons and combat tools on their respective shelves, and the doors to the other 2 underground tunnels to neighbouring houses, one which led to the room where they kept their electricity generator, and the other which led to their makeshift farm where they grew their freshest food. As Ewan and Shannon climbed the stairs, they began to hear gasps and high-pitched voices from inside the house. Ewan had predicted his friend's reactions well. The news about Oakenfold must have been painful for them too. But their shouts were more panicked than he had imagined. It was not worried conversation coming from the Underdogs. It was mass hysteria. He and Shannon scrambled to the top of the stairs and burst through the door to the living room. The collapsed body of Joseph McCormick lay on the carpet, unmoving.
Oh, God. Yeah, oh, God. You had to end it that way.
We are going to have to leave it. Okay, because it will be an act of cruelty to give no further details, McCormick is not dead. I will say that.
That's a relief. That's a relief. Do you think...
go on.
Yeah, go on. No, you go on first.
I was about to say that you find out the reasons why he collapsed pretty much immediately in chapter 3, and so yes, there is an impact on the story going forward, but he's not dead. You don't need to worry about that. But that is, despite that, a decent place to leave it for this evening.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. I was going to ask, so Kate and Raj are going to the prison to meet their brother, Kate's brother.
Well, the aim is, at the end of the war, once they've defeated Nicholas Grant, if they do, then they'll free the British population, and hopefully James will still be alive. Kate and Raj haven't gone anywhere. They're still in Spitfire's Rise. They're not going to go on a solo mission right to the middle of New London prison, trying to find... In fact, I remember in book 1, Kate ended up actually in the middle of the inner city prison, and pretty much the first thing she did was go off looking for James, and it took Ewan coming after her and basically telling her, there's millions of people in here, you are not going to find your brother here. Needle in a haystack doesn't even cover it. But it took a long time to accept that she's better off fighting for him on the outside than the inside. So yeah, Kate and Raj went outside to celebrate James's birthday, and saw the missile attack, and now they're back inside.
Back inside. Okay.
Yep, and they've just now found out that the AME test centre is Oakenfold Special School, and on top of that, McCormick collapsed for reasons that they don't know. They're getting a bit rough already, and it's only 2 chapters in.
A lot of drama coming up. Really excited. Now, this makes me want to... I really want to continue, but I don't think that's a possibility here right now for chapter 3. But hopefully...
Let me just check how chapter 3 ends.
No spoilers, though. I like how there's a bit of suspense here.
Yeah, I mean, it's the ending of chapter 3 is not awful. It's just not particularly... It's just not massively as exciting as the previous ones have been. And I'm also thinking, right now, you just know everything you need to know about where the book's going. So
that's true. Okay. Yeah, well, I look forward to chapter 3 coming up next month, inshallah.
Yeah, thank you.
And
thanks again for having me. It's a pleasure as always.
And the audience, do you guys have any questions? Aisha, Danya, I believe there are a couple of viewers. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
And if anyone watching the recording has any questions, then message Autistic Not Weird.
Yes. I will try and link, or I think we've tagged you, so it would be easier for the audience to contact.
Thank you.
Aisha's saying no questions, just too invested in this now.
No.
I think we're all invested in this.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I hope you prefer this story to the first one, because I certainly do. I think book 1 is the least good of the 4 books, in my opinion, to the point where it's funny. I remember when I was reading it through with you all, I kept thinking, I don't remember it being just this intense, because after Tooth and Nail, and after its bloody hell acceleration, and absolutely after Uprising as well. It's like, in my head, Underdogs book 1 kind of became the fairly tame one by comparison. It's only when I start reading it that I suddenly realise, oh, it's actually not that tame. But yeah, but
I think,
go on.
There were a couple of chapters where you were very tensed up because of how violent and like it's all going to be, and we were also invested, like Aisha said, into
Yeah,
knowing
thank you.
exactly what was going to happen. Yeah. So
Got to
yeah,
admit,
there were
it
a
is
couple of
fun
chapters.
reading your own story when you've not read it for just long enough that you forget what it actually feels like.
That's true. It's like you're rereading it, and like it's all a brand new
Right.
world all over again.
Mm.
So well, thank you so much, Chris, for your time
That's right. Thank
and
you
for
very much.
reading us these chapters. I absolutely loved it, and I know for a fact that the audience that we have right now, they loved it, and the people who are going to go through this later on, I'm sure they'll love it as well. And we look forward to chapter 3
Great. Thank you.
in the next month.
Okay.
Well,
Well, thank you very much, everyone, and see you next
thank
month.
you. See you next month. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.